And welcome to the City Council meeting for August 18th, 2020. To remind Victoria residents that they can watch City Council meetings live on Suddenly channels 15 or 115 on our city website, www.victoriatx.gov/VTV15, or on the city's Facebook page. If you wish to participate in the citizens communication segment of tonight's meeting, you will need to go so through video clips. We have set up this virtual format to limit social gatherings and protect our citizens and city employees from COVID-19. Here's how to access the video conference during citizen communications. Visit www.zoom.com from your web browser. Select Join a Meeting located at the top of your browser and input 44573-113. Again, 444-573-113 for the meeting ID. Select Join followed by Open Zoom, then Join with Computer Audio. Click on the icon labeled Participants to access the option to raise hand at the bottom of the screen. Once you click Raise Hand, our moderator will announce you by your username you've selected. That will be your cue to begin speaking to council. Comments will be provided with audio only. There will not be an opportunity at this time to share your screen for any additional presentations. Please remember to silence any cell phones, televisions, or other background noise so that we can clearly hear your comments. During the citizens communication segment of tonight's meeting, the 5-minute comment period applies as it did when citizens were in person. Again, we ask the comments be 5 minutes or less. This information also is posted on our website, again at victoriatx.gov/VTV15. It is generally the practice of City Council not to respond to comment made during this time, but city staff will be available to follow up as necessary. Now I would ask City Secretary to call the roll for a
Councilman Del Arza.
I am present.
Mayor Pro Tem Solis. I believe she's here, but muted. Councilman, that's okay. Councilman Bachnight. Councilwoman Scott.
Here.
Councilman Young.
Here.
Councilman Lofgren.
Here.
And Mayor McCoy.
here. We
Thank
have
you.
a full quorum of all members tonight. So I will now ask you to join the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
One nation, God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I go into communications. I have one announcement to make, a reminder on behalf of the Census Complete Count Committee. The 2020 Census Response deadline has been moved back to September 30th, 2020. So it's important that we all respond now to the 2020 census. It's vital to our city's representation, funding, and success. Census data helps determine the number of each state holds in the U.S. House of Representatives and how big dollars in federal funds will be allocated to the states and communities for the next 10 years. As of today, our state self-response rate is 58.3%, and Victoria County's self-response rate is under that average at 57.9%. Victoria residents can respond online at 2020census.gov by phone or by mail. And you have until September 30th to respond. For more information, visit www.victoriacounts.com. Mr. City Manager, do you have any other announcements for tonight?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, then I'll move on to public and employee recognition. And I have a resolution in honor of Dr. David Hines for his service to Victoria College and our community. So, Mr. Gooch.
Yes, sir. This is a resolution honoring Dr. David Hines and declaring today to be Dr. David Hines Day. And it reads in part, whereas Dr. David Hines began his career with Victoria College in July of 2015, during this time leading Victoria College through challenging times of Hurricane Harvey and the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas Dr. David Hines accomplished many goals during his 5-year tenure, including developing and implementing the 2015 through 2020 strategic plan, highlighting student success, community need, and institutional excellence. Also developing a 2016 through 2025 facilities master plan aimed to ensure Victoria College's facilities serve the next generation of students. Whereas Dr. David Hines' other notable achievements include strengthening partnerships with Victoria Independent School District, the University of Houston, Victoria, and the business and industrial community throughout the Crossroads. Dr. David Hines led Victoria College to join 47 other community colleges in Texas to embrace the Pathways framework that focuses on guiding students through their academic and career goals. Dr. Hines also helped Victoria College become a member of the Junior College Athletic Association in 2019. Whereas during Dr. David Hines' leadership, Victoria College has been recognized nationally 3 consecutive years as one of the country's great colleges to work for. Now, therefore, I, Raleigh McCoy, Mayor of the City of Victoria, Texas, do officially declare Dr. David Hines as an honorary citizen of Victoria, regardless of where his future travels may take him, and declare this August 18th, 2020, to be Dr. David Hines Day in Victoria, Texas.
Thank you, Mr. And I'm not sure if you're on or able to speak.
Yeah, Raleigh, I think I've got it out. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I don't know if you can or not, but I'm wearing my pirate t-shirt right now. And I just, made friends here in Victoria while I've been here. I'm so proud of what we've done at the college in this short period, and just happy to be part of a long, great tree of Victoria College. I feel like I've just, scratched the surface, and then then COVID comes and I'm leaving. So every on the line has, as people, as the roll call came down, so many friends I'm in Victoria, so many people I cherish memories being with, and learned so much from so many of you. And Ollie, I want to put you at the top of that one. So I can't thank you enough for your friendship, and wish everybody in Victoria the very best. And if today is my day, then hey, I got a day. That's pretty good.
You got about 6 hours to celebrate. And you'll, in that citizenship, you'll be receiving your honorary tax bill as well.
Well, I wake up any more time, but you all know the tear rolling down my face, because that's me, and I can't thank you all enough. I appreciate it. So
Thank you for all you've done. We'll miss you, but we'll see you around.
okay, stay in touch.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Hines.
Thank you.
Bye, Eddie.
Bye.
Hines.
Are there any other recognitions tonight?
No, sir.
And we'll move on from items from council. Are there any items from council this evening? Seeing none, we'll move into citizens communication. As a reminder, if you wish to participate in citizens communication segment of this meeting, You will need to do so through a video conferencing option. Comments will be provided with audio only. There will not be an opportunity at the time to share your screen or any additional presentations. Please remember to silence any cell phones, televisions, or other background noise so we can clearly hear comments. During this portion of the meeting, the 5-minute rule period still applies as it did when citizens were here in person. Mr. Foote, do you have any citizens who wish to speak?
Yes, Mayor, we have a Karen Huvar who wishes to speak.
Okay, Ms. Huvar?
Yes, I was reading House on Liberty Street, 503 that is set for, what is 505, set for demolish.
Yes, ma'am.
We own the house next to it, and we've actually just recently had to move out because of the fleas so bad and roaches and everything like that. So, and if that house falls, it will be falling on our house. Yeah, there's holes inside the walls. The animals are coming in and out. So I was just wanting to know if it was going to be demolished or what the vote on it was going to be.
Well, I think it's on the agenda, so it will be later in the meeting.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and there's also nobody living there. Sorry, my dad's here helping me, so.
Well, thank you for your input.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other citizens who wish to speak?
Mayor, I see no other citizens wishing to speak.
Okay, then we'll move into items with hearings. Mr. Gooch?
There is one item posted for a public hearing tonight, and it is to adopt the city's CDBG 2020 through 2024 Consolidated Plan, the 2020 through 2021 Annual Action Plan, the 2020 Analysis of Impediments, and Citizen Participation Plan.
William, do we have a presentation?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Julie will be providing that update, that presentation. They're probably queuing that up now.
To hear that before I open the public.
Good evening, Campbell. I think this is the wrong presentation,
Yeah.
unfortunately. James. Okay, there we go. So tonight I'm here to present the 2020-2024 CDBG Consolidated Plan and our 2020 Annual Action Plan. Next slide, James. So just a background, the comp plan is a 5-year planning document that identifies housing and community development needs within the city's low and moderate income communities and outlines how the city will address those needs. It guides investments and assists HUD in achieving its mission of satisfying the national objectives of providing decent housing, providing suitable living environments, and then also expanding economic opportunities for the low to moderate income individuals within our community. Next slide, James. So this is all the elements of the comprehensive or consolidated plan. When we talk about the comp plan, we're talking about a large body of work that relates to gathered data, community and stakeholder inputs, needs assessments, strategic plans to address problems identified, and an annual action plan to further the goals that are outlined throughout the document. And this allows the city to create the strategic 5-year community development plan that assists, as I said, our low to moderate income peoples and households within Victoria. So for our 2024 consolidated plan goals, we outline activities we plan to undertake in the years 20 to 24 to align with the goals that we establish in that con plan. So these goals are divided into categories, which you can see on the screen, and are administration goals, which is to continue to plan, monitor, and administer entitlement grant programs and ensure compliance with federal regulations. Public infrastructure and improvement goals, which is to enhance livability through improvement of public infrastructures, which is street lighting, sidewalk type projects, and parks in CDBG eligible census tracts. Our neighborhood program goals include to support demolition projects to address unsafe structures in low and moderate income areas, and then also neighborhood cleanups. And affordable housing goals include addressing low to moderate income homeowner assistance needs through roof rehabilitation and then preserving safe housing, as well as assisting first-time homebuyers through down payment assistance programs, and then assisting in utility taps and connections. Our public facility goals include supporting renovation or and improvements to public facilities that serve low to moderate income individuals who are homeless and are also in need of employment or job training services. Community facility providers, such as our food banks and youth centers in town, and then also our special needs population facilities. And then finally, our public service goals is to support public service activities that provide essential services to persons who are low or moderate income, homeless, or may have special needs. So programs such as assistance support services, child and youth services, employment or job training programs, mental health and wellness services, homeless and at-risk prevention services, senior and or disabled services, and then addressing services for the abused and neglected children. So we not only establish our goals in our comp plan, then we also allocate funding. Each annual action plan activity has to tie back to those goals that we establish in the 5-year plan. And then in order to establish those goals, we have to estimate the funding we will receive throughout the 5 years. We've estimated conservatively, due to the fact that the census is currently underway. Historically, we have seen a reduction in funding in the years just following the census, and then our funding sometimes will creep back up as the farther out we are from the census. And so with that, our 2020 allocation is $604,000, and then we are anticipating our budgeting for the next 5 years, $525,000 for each program year after that. And then we will adjust these numbers in our annual action plans as funds are actually awarded to us. Next slide. So that kind of covers the basis of our 5-year comp plan. Next, we have our annual action plan, which is the portion of the plan that actually identifies the activities and programs and then what those funding amounts are. Next slide. So if you remember, this was presented to council back in June, but for our 2020 to 2021 funding, we were allocated approximately $604,000. Of that, $120,000 it will be going towards administration, which is 20% of the grant. We will be establishing a roof rehabilitation program, which will be an income-based program and meeting the affordable housing goals for $50,000. Our neighborhood program activity will include demolition, which we're budgeting $100,000 towards. Our public infrastructure projects is a street lighting project, which we're allocating approximately $68,000. And then our public improvements projects are solar lighting projects in 3 parks, MLK Park, Pine Street Park, and Queen City Park, for a total of $75,000. And then we are allocating $100,000 to public facilities and $90,000 to public services, which I will go over in a little bit more detail. Again, if you'll remember, public services is capped at 15% of the grant. Slide. So this is the street lighting project area where we will be adding additional street lights for a budget of approximately $68,000. It's the area in the outlined in the heavy black line. And as you know, we can only do public infrastructure projects in CDBG eligible areas, which are represented in yellow on the map. Next slide. These are the three parks that we will be adding solar lighting to: Queen City Park, Martin Luther King Jr. Park, and then Pine Street Community Park. And these are also in eligible CDBG tracks, census tracks. Next slide. So outside of the public infrastructure and public improvements, we have an application-based process to award funds for public facilities and public service agencies. So nonprofits apply for CDBG funding for eligible activity that meets HUD's national objectives and helps our low to moderate income citizens. We always try to fund all applicants, even if we can only partially fund their request. And you do not see a nonprofit on the subsequent slides on the award list, then that means that they didn't apply. This year, we were able to fund all applications. So due to federal requirements, we have a pretty in-depth process. So it begins with advertising the availability of the funds, which began on April 2nd. And then we hold a public facility agency workshop where we invite all nonprofits to question and answer. We go over different national objectives that are required to be met, and then some different reporting requirements in order to receive these funds. Then we open it up for applications, and we are always open to talking to nonprofits to help them develop their applications. And this year, the deadline was May 2nd. And then after we receive applications, then we continue to take time to help tweak those and make sure that they're meeting all of the national objectives and make sure that the activities that the nonprofits are requesting can be done. After that, we take our funding recommendations to council. So like none of these funding recommendations should be new. That was done on June 2nd at our council meeting. And then we get to work on actually drafting the plans. And once we have the draft plans in place, we open up our public comment period. Tonight, we are asking for approval of the plans. Once they're approved, we will send them to HUD. And after HUD receives and then approves them, then we get to work on developing any sort of program guidelines. For example, we'll have to write our roof rehabilitation program, and then also working with our subrecipients or all the nonprofits and getting their contracts executed. And then the funds are available to be expended between October 1st and September 30th, 2021. Next slide. So we have one public facility project that was applied for and that we're recommending funding for this year, and that is $100,000 to Perpetual Help Home, who they wish to open a training and community center at 506 East Wanlin. Next slide. And then our 2020 to 2021 public service agency is that we're recommending to fund 8 programs that will help 427 low to moderate income persons in Victoria for a total budget of $90,000, which is under that 15% cap. So what we're looking at is the Boys and Girls Club Summer Camp Program, Community Action Committee Utility Assistance Program, Community Action Committee's Meals on Wheels Program, Golden Crescent Food Bank Kids Backpack Program, Golden Crescent CASA, which helps with training their caseworkers and volunteers, Gulf Bend Center's Wellness Community, Meals on Wheels Victoria, again, more meals on home delivered meals, and then YMCA of the Golden Crescent for a child care program. Next slide. So that concludes my overview of the 5-year plan and the 2020 annual action plan. It also, we're asking for approval of the analysis of impediments that was presented at the last council meeting, as well as our citizen participation plan. So with approval of all those documents, we will submit that to HUD for approval and then have the money available to spend October 1st. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any question, Ms. Fogum?
Julie,
Yes.
if we go back to the agency funding that has all those little squares, it kind of looks like the calendar of the timing that is needed for all people to apply. I'm talking about the nonprofits. is that a calendar that pretty much is used like for the following years for the $525,000 distributed for 2021 to 23 and 24?
Yeah, ma'am. So the kind of announcement of the funding is available is either in March and April timeframe, and we announce that in the paper, and then we also send it. We have an email distribution list of all the nonprofits that we can think of in Victoria, and we ask other nonprofits to pass on, like the Homeless Coalition and stuff. We really try and get the word out there, and so we have that announcement, and that always happens in springtime, so late March, early April. And then the application is always due late April, early May. And then in June is when we always bring funding recommendations to council. And then usually it's the second meeting in August that we're asking for approval so we can get everything submitted to HUD on time.
Okay, for the nonprofits, can a church apply for something or not?
Yes, ma'am. So churches are eligible so long as whatever activity they are undertaking does not require the person that is receiving assistance to participate in any sort of religious activity in order to receive that assistance.
Okay.
So as long as you're not requiring them to attend a service or a Bible study, you know, and the assistance is just based on their need, churches are an eligible subrecipient.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, Ms. Fulgham? Hearing none, I will open a public hearing on this matter before entertaining a motion. The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to participate can use the same process as for citizens communication. Foot, if you will let me know if anybody is on, please, sir.
There is no one who wishes to speak.
Therefore, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this item.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item C1. Any further discussion? And I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mr. Gooch, take us on into the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. There are 5 agenda items on the consent agenda tonight that will be approved by a single vote. They are first, the adoption of minutes of the council meeting held on August 4th, 2020. Second, the amendment of the city code to create a tourism advisory board to provide direction and assistance to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. That is a second and third reading. Third is a resolution to continue the state of local disaster. Fourth is an amendment to section 2-97 related to the Parks and Recreation Commission's purpose and bylaws. That is also a second and third reading. And fifth is approval of a memorandum of understanding with Victoria County for the 2020 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as read.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. We can now move on to items for council, please.
Item E1, Mayor, is the approval of the 30th Amendment to the Waste Management Contract.
I move we approve and adopt.
Second.
Motion and a second on item E1. Is there any discussion?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'd like to go through it real quick, just to make sure that everyone understands. This will only be used in the case that we lose more than 4 employees to COVID-19 or some other disaster that we cannot cover our garbage routes. In that case, this gives us the ability to reach out to Waste Management, our current commercial hauler, to seek drivers and vehicles to be able to work with us to complete our routes so that our citizens don't see any interruption in service should we lose multiple people. This is something the city manager kind of brought to our attention a little while back. It took us a few weeks to get an agreement in place, but no money will be spent and no action would be taken unless we get to that cutoff point of losing at least 4 of our personnel and not being able to complete our daily rounds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lessig. There's a motion, a second on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of item E1 say so by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Item E2, Mayor, is a resolution to approve a new contract with Texas Land Management doing business as Gardenville for various composting operations.
Good evening, Mayor and Council again. Getting twice in a row tonight. So our compost facility has been operated by Gardenville, or a company called Texas Landfill Management out of Austin, Texas. They started their current contract in 2010, but it took us a couple of years to get a permit through TCQ and everything. So we actually opened the facility, I believe, in February of 2012. Their contract was set to expire April 30th of 2019. So trying to get ahead of it, we released the first RFP on October of 2018. We received 2 proposals. We went through and looked through those proposals, and due to various reasons, including price, I came back to council and asked council to throw those bids out, which we did in February of 2019. We rebid the RFP, hoping to get maybe better pricing, hoping to get possibly some other entities involved in the process. We put out a second RFP in June 28th of 2019, received 2 proposals, one from Gardenville, which bid on both, but then a different proposer from the first time. Again, we started looking at them. We found something we could work with. We came back to council and we started negotiate, let council know that we were going to work through negotiations. So we started that in September of 2019. This process has taken almost 2 years to get to where we're at. But we reached an agreement in July of 2020 this year. And we're bringing that new contract to you now. There is an increase that will be tied to the disposal rate, the tipping fees that we get charged for our brush and bulky brush and yard waste that we drop at the landfill. So we pay for that by ton. However, although it is an increase, it is still a huge improvement over where the other bidder was. And so we believe that at this point, we would like to recommend that we pass this. The current rate that we're charging, and these numbers will be coming back to you the first meeting in September, is currently $1.85 per month per customer for brush pickup, and that's bulky included. You'll remember the brush pickup is 4 times a year, and then the bulky waste is twice a year. And the new rate will be $1.98, so we're going to go up 13 cents. The yard waste rate, which is picked up weekly, that's your yard trimmings that you can put in paper bags or a cardboard box. They're at $1.97. That rate's going to go to $2.09, which is a 12-cent increase. So you're looking at 25 cents across the board. Now, it's important that for the remainder of the year, we're not going to hit our customers with this rate increase. We're going to cover the increase through our current year with money that we currently have in our department. We're not going to come back for a budget transfer or anything like that. So this will cover us, and then we will be coming back to you the first meeting in September, seeking this increase to help offset that cost of the disposal on this contract. Now, If you haven't used the product, I'm going to take just a second to tell you, please go out there and try it. It's a great product. I use it myself as often as possible. And of course, it never hurts to have sales because that money comes back to the city as royalty. So if you do any gardening, please take the time to go out and pick some up and give it a try. And I'll answer any questions.
Right. Any other questions for Mr. Lussick?
You're saying we can go out to the landfill and do compost?
The compost facility is located next door to the landfill, so they have their own entrance and the sign there. And you can go in there. We sell it by the bag. We can also sell it in bulk.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I don't believe we have a motion on this yet. Is there any?
I move to adopt.
A second.
A motion is second to adopt item E2. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign.
Thank you.
Mayor, item E3 is a resolution to approve amendments to the Parks and Recreation Commission bylaws.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. During the last regular meeting of the City Council, we proposed changes to the code to the Parks and Recreation Commission, discussed the background of the Parks and Recreation Commission. In the amended bylaws that are presented tonight, most of the changes made were to match the city code. In addition, we added a few paragraphs to include special and electronic meetings. During the regularly scheduled meeting of the Parks Commission held last Monday, August 10th, the commission reviewed and approved a resolution in support of the bylaw amendments. This concludes the changes to the Parks and Recreation Commission bylaws and code. Our next step would be to appoint the Parks and Recreation Commissioners to the commission during the City Council meeting on September the 15th. I know it's really short, but I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Any questions, more questions for Mr. Alfaro?
I move to adopt item E3.
Second.
Motion is second on item E3. Is there any further discussion from council? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign for no.
Thank you.
Mayor, item E4 is a resolution appealing the demolition order for 505 South Liberty Street issued by the Building and Standards Commission on August 4th, 2020. And Mayor, I'd like to point out that in this resolution draft, I did not draft the resolution to either approve or deny. There is some optional language in the first paragraph. And so, council members, when you choose to make a motion on this particular item, if you would please indicate if your motion is to deny the appeal and sustain the order of the Building and Standards Commission, or to grant the appeal and overturn the Building and Standards Commission order. That'll help for clarity's purpose. And I can help walk through that after Ms. Fulton does her presentation.
Thank
Again,
you.
good evening. I just have a few short slides. As Thomas said, on August 4th, the Building and Standards Commission issued an order to demolish the structure at 505 South Liberty Street. The property owner has appealed the demolition order to City Council and is asking Council to overturn that order. And then staff recommends that the order be upheld. As you can see from this first picture, the small picture is a picture of the property when we first started inspections on it. And as you can see, the property owner's done some cleanup of the vegetation, but the second picture is a more recent picture of what it looks like. Next slide. So Rick Madrid, our building official, has reported that the structure has severe damage to the exterior load-bearing walls, and the foundation has deteriorated beams and broken or cracked piers. The exterior load-bearing beams are in a severely deteriorated condition, and the exterior walls have extensive deterioration, including studs causing major structural failures. There was I believe, a tree that had fallen on, as you can see that picture on the right of your screen, shows some pretty extensive damage that has affected the structural integrity of the building. The value of the structure is $61,880, and the commission found that the damage exceeds over 50% of the value of the structure and that demolition is necessary. I have a few more pictures, James, if you'll just quickly kind of go through the additional pictures. The picture on the right, I feel like, doesn't really do a lot of justice on the previous slide. There is a lot of leaning happening when you look at the back of the building. And sometimes that doesn't really come through our pictures, but you can definitely tell that there's vertical members out of alignment. And then, of course, you can see the damage to the structural damage that exists on, I believe that's the south side of the house. James, that's additional pictures of that damage. Next slide. So again, that's the rear of the property. And then the final slide shows pictures of both the rear and the front. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Julie. Julie, this is Ricky. The caller earlier said that the house was vacant, correct?
Yes, sir. It's vacant.
It appeared in the letter that we got from the homeowner. It said something about being occupied.
And I believe it was occupied by his father, who passed away, and since his father's death, it has been unoccupied.
And you also said some vegetation had been cleaned up, correct?
Yes, so it was originally covered in vines, have since been cleared off, and the picture on the right was taken on August 4th.
But has any been done to the structure itself?
No, sir, not to improve the structural repairs. There's some new plywood on the windows, but no work has been performed to actually improve or work done that would improve the structural integrity of the building.
Again, the letter that the owner wrote is very difficult to read. It says that a roofer had been contracted, but due to COVID-19 is in recovery, correct?
Yes, and once a building has demolition orders issued, we won't issue any permits on the building. And so I believe Rick has spoken to the contractor that's for just the roof, but roof is honestly the least of the problems when it comes to the structural integrity of this house.
All right, thank you, Julie.
So no work has been performed. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Would entertain a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to deny the deal for demolition.
I second.
Is that a suitable motion, Mr. Gooch?
Yes, sir. For clarity, there's a motion to deny the appeal and sustain the order of the Building and Standards Commission or to demolish the structure.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Tom.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion from council? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same side. We'll move to city manager reports. Mr.
Good evening.
Garza.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you know, we earlier this year, late last year, is a benefits consultant to Lockton. And so there's been a lot of work that Lockton has done in conjunction with our HR department. And so today, both Cheryl and Mr. Sims with Lockton will be providing an update for you on a lot of that work that they both have worked on over the last 6 months. And hopefully you find it educational, and hopefully everyone finds it or sees it as an enhancement to our benefit offerings. So with that, I'm Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. It's all good to see you again. And since this is my first council Zoom meeting, it is good to be seen. So glad to have y'all here this evening. As Mr. Garza mentioned, John Sims with Lockton is going to help present this material. I just wanted to first start off, and James, you can slip to the next slide. There you go. I just wanted to start off and sort of talk about a little bit about what has been our strategy and then where we've been recently, especially with working with Lockton, and then where we want to be today and then in the future. So our strategy has always been to provide benefits to employees that's part of their total compensation, salary and benefits package, but do so in a way that continues to manage our self-funded health plan and balance the city's contributions and the employee contributions, and continue to be very aware of where we're at with regards to that reserve balance. Currently, we're at about a 3-month reserve. You know, our ultimate goal would have a year of 12 months worth of a reserve balance. We've had to make tough decisions regarding the medical plans in particular. You know, that wasn't a popular decision when we moved to 2 high deductible plans, but with council's approval, we did that. We moved away from the traditional copay or PPO plan. That has been in place. That is turning the tide, so to speak, with some of our data. We went out and teamed with Lockton, a very aggressive approach. I think that gave us a very fresh perspective as our new benefit consultant. One of the early on indicators was just better budgeting process for us overall to connect our contribution levels with plan claim experience. And so again, you'll see that tonight with John presenting some of that material. Where we want to go, where we want to be today and then in the future is to continue to offer a strong competitive benefit package that supports our efforts to retain and attract quality employees. That's not left our focus. You know, we do receive challenges around that at times, but we still want to continue to keep that in our forefront. We want to increase our health fund reserve balance. As I mentioned, a goal of ours would be to build that balance up to a 12-month mark. And we also want to make sure that we're exploring new benefit offerings that enhance our total package. And so some of that you'll see being brought to you tonight as a means of what we want to do today and in the future. Next slide, James. The agenda is pretty short. There's a couple slides to go with it, but you know, we're going to review Lockton's review of our current plan. And when I say review of our current plan, they really looked at every single aspect of our plan, went to market and looked at a variety of different findings and recommendations that are brought to you tonight. And then we'll review our current and renewal annual cost and some of the decision points that we're recommending be made. And with that, I want to welcome back John Sims. John, as you might recall, is our Vice President, team lead for our Victoria account. And he's going to present the rest of the material for you tonight. And obviously, if you have any questions as we go through, either for myself or for John, please just stop us and ask as we move through the material. John, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Awesome.
All right, very good. So different times, right? Here we are with on go. I get to see all of you. That's great. I would rather be there in person, but under the circumstances, I hope you understand. And so here and council, we appreciate the opportunity to visit with you guys, and we've got numerous slides to walk through. I know you've seen these over the last week or so, so I'm going to kind of go through it at a good clip here, but trust that you'll jump in and interrupt, ask questions as you see fit. So with that, unless you guys have any other comments, I'll jump in. Are we ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
All right,
please.
very, very good. Well, so we completed a full RFP process, as Cheryl mentioned, of all your benefit programs. In terms of RFP responses, you can see the numbers there by line of coverage. So we feel like that was a good representation of the marketplace and gave you good opportunities for improvement and/or comparison to what you have today. So with that, let's move to the next slide. All right, so taking the medical first, obviously the biggest budget item for you guys. We've done a complete analysis of the medical program, including looking at detailed data around your historical claims, both in terms of aggregate claim amounts, but also in terms of actual specific providers that have been utilized over the last 12 months. And through analysis, it appears that the Blue Cross network, along with their administration, would be a good option for you guys. We're projecting savings off of the renewal of just over $500,000. Now that is off the renewal. So in summary, once we've done the projections of the current plan in terms of percentages, your current with Aetna, if you can get on, it would be roughly a 4.5% increase. And with Blue Cross and the underlying administration, the network, the other underlying administration, it's roughly 4.5% reduction in projected cost. We're going to talk a little further about that in the recommendations in just a second. But in terms of plan design, roughly speaking, we looked at the PPO plan option, as Cheryl mentioned. I know it was a leap to go to strictly high deductible plans, but frankly, the pain, if you of making that jump is you've already been through, if you will, and to move back to offering a PPO would not be an option that we would suggest that you take at this point, because it just in pure nature of the beast, it's a more more expensive option over time. And so we would suggest that you not go down that path at this point. In terms of overall looking at your programs, there's a little matter about health savings accounts. Obviously, you guys offer those in conjunction with your high deductible plans. You're not making contributions to that, which other cities and other employers in the marketplace would typically make some form of option or contribution to that. At this point, we say to not do that. It's kind of picking our battle, if you will, in terms of making our recommendations to move forward with your program. So the expense of that is not justified in our at this point. Your plan design, we'll talk about more in detail in a second, but it's fall between the 25th and 70th percentile of your competition, basically looking at other cities. And your employee cost share in terms of percentage of cost, percentage of your plan cost, is considered within the market reasonable. You'll see that the dollar amount of your contributions are a little high, primarily on the family side. But in terms of recommendations, we think you ought to continue the current course in terms of monthly premiums for employees and retirees, not make any adjustments to those. We're not suggesting plan designs at this plan changes at this point, mainly around the perspective of that the current plans are reasonably competitive, and anything else that may be needed in terms of competitive position as over time others employers will continue to cost shift in the way of higher deductibles, out of pockets, et cetera, and higher employee contributions. So we're suggesting you hang pat with Brad on those items. Did I hear a question? Okay. And then roughly speaking, in terms of the best value, we talked about the savings. Blue Cross has also included a $100,000 wellness, $50,000 RX, and $20,000 admin allowance, all of which basically will be used to enhance your program in terms of wellness. The admin and the RX credit, frankly, are just incentives that can go directly to your bottom line in terms of reducing cost. As I said, we looked at providers in detail to identify any kind of disruption to employees. And frankly, the disruption is minimal. In fact, you can argue that it actually improves with Blue Cross in terms of the net gain of providers is 9 of those that have been utilized in the past. And we're including $79,000, $80,000 in claims that were previously, let's just say this, they will be paid at the in-network level going forward. So really it's a net gain in that regard. The base administrative fee is guaranteed for 3 years, and so that's not going to change. So I'm saying keep your budget rates where they are. Talk a little bit about that. The bulk of the savings is being held and not being spent, if you will. We'd like for the to hold those dollars so that the health fund reserves can be improved over this year. So some of the savings that we're projecting above, we're thinking should be utilized as a increase in your reserves, if that makes sense. And we're going to spend a little bit of the savings on your enhancements to your benefits package that we'll talk about in this. So unless there's questions, I'll move right along. Next slide. Okay, huge number of details. We're going to go over each one of these in detail. I'm just kidding. So these are all your rates that are currently in place. You'll see the first category is the Aetna calendar year current funding rate is your total rate, the employee portion and the city's portion, and the percentage employee cost share. So earlier when I was talking about cost share, that's what I'm talking about. What portion does the employee cover? So you'll see down at the bottom of the darker blue section, so the combined budget today, budget rates, $5,768,000, and the split there is right at 24% employee cost share. If you look at all plans combined. On a renewal basis, that's going up to $6,024,000 is the projection. And with the Blue Cross program in place, we are assuming a $5,729,000 budget figure. So that's roughly $38,000 to the good. And again, we project a much larger savings, but we're keeping the budget rates basically where they are to increase those reserves. So if that makes sense to you guys, I'll move on. Next slide. So this is really just a reference point for you in terms of a snapshot of how your plan is structured. Deductible for the high deductible plan 1, $1,750, $3,500 versus the other option is a higher deductible, but has a lower maximum out of pocket at $4,800 versus $6,000 for plan 1. And that includes the deductible. You have more people participating in your plan 2 option at this point. Co-insurance is there, and your prescription drugs, because of the fact that it's a qualified high deductible health plan, everything the benefits come after that deductible is satisfied. That's federal legislative requirement associated with these type plans, which also enables you to open a health savings account, or employees have that option to open that account. So there's just, again, just a reference point. So moving on to the next slide. So this is benchmark data looking at our other Texas-based city clients. And so just looking at the high deductible in-network at this point, in-network deductible, your high deductible plan 1 is here on the left. The dark is the employee only, the green is family, and the next plan, high deductible 2, is $3,200, $6,400. So in terms of looking at it at a kind of a broad view, if you will, I like, frankly, your plan design because it sort of straddles the market in terms of offering a lower deductible option, $1,750 versus 20th quartile, the mean, and the 75th. So those are your other city clocks out there kind of put into a format of like we would see a retirement kind of plan comparison. But so hopefully that makes sense to you to look at how the deductible compares. The out-of-pockets, as I mentioned before, we're not suggesting you change your out-of-pockets or your deductibles at this point. And mainly that's around your out-of-pockets. You could argue are a little bit on the higher end compared to other cities and within market. And these other plans, it's just the nature of the beast. Employers continue to kind of cost shift to employees in the way of contributions and potential out-of-pocket under the plan. So we're thinking, hang in with the plans you had today. They're competitive to reasonably competitive and do not need to be adjusted at the point in our view. So moving on from there, next slide. All right, so contributions. We've got both your two plans, high deductible plans, in the green and the red lines. So this top left box represents your employee contributions relative to the marketplace. And you can see that basically you're on the higher end in terms of dollars. On the employer side of this, you're in there with the market on the higher end, but basically that's a function of the underlying cost of the plan itself. So as we talked about, your plan, especially the deductibles, are pretty competitive. And so there's no reason to tweak those, nor is there a reason really to necessarily overreact to where you look or appear in terms of these employee contributions. At the end of the day, you have a benefit program that is competitive in the marketplace. And with a no increase in employee contributions, you're not going to exasperate that issue. It's will be something that others will catch up to you, if that makes sense. And you're moving to, assuming you agree with the Blue Cross move, moving to a plan that will make that more affordable over time. And so we choose to work on employee contributions in the future as we get our house organized relative to the reserve. If you look at in terms of employee percentage cost share, employee only, 4% is the average for cities, but 14 and 13 is very generous relative to other employers in the marketplace. So you not only compete with other cities, obviously, you're also competing with other employers. And so from that perspective, across the board, in terms of percentages, your plan is what I would deem to be reasonably competitive. You can see the percentages by each cost tier where they stand, and actually you're on the lower end in terms of full family employee contributions for coverage. On the high school plan too. So moving on from there, all right, moving into dental. Your dental plans run very well relative to your budget rates, your budget accrual rates. It's a self-funded plan as well. So technically you could lower your rates 15.6% based on our actuarial projections. We're not suggesting you do that at this point. Again, from a reserve standpoint, we think that you should continue on with your current premiums that you're charging employees and retirees. Keep your funding rates where they are today. Again, helping reserves. We do suggest that you make a move to Delta Dental from the current Aetna program. And the reason for that is that the percentage of network claims goes up from roughly 39 to roughly 50% with the move. So they have a broader network, better discounts. I think your employee will be better served in that Delta Dental network. The vision plan, MetLife has been your current service provider. They've actually, there's a slight reduction in their cost. They've improved the plan design in terms of your allowances, and they're very competitive. And in terms of in-networkizations, roughly 99%. So there's just really nothing wrong with MetLife. We're not hearing kind of service issues, so we think you should stay there with them moving forward. So moving to the next slide. Okay, so life and disability. Your current life program is with Standard. Most employers provide some form of employer-based basic life and maybe plan. They would also typically offer some kind of employer-supported or employer-provided STD and LTD, short-term disability, long-term disability programs. At this point, there is no basic life. It's simply a voluntary life only program. So one of the two things that we are suggesting that you improve your overall benefit offering is to include a times base annual earnings of life insurance, not to exceed $100,000. The estimated premium for that based on the census the current census is really $28,000. So if you recall about the slight decrease in the medical plan budget accrual, that's where we're going to spend or reallocate, if you will, those budget dollars to purchase or enhance your life program by giving employees 1 times their earnings. The current vendor is Standard, and one of the other enhancements on the life insurance is we've expanded the voluntary life program. Currently, you offer 1, 2, 3 times earnings with Standard Life. That program is going to continue. The enhancement primarily is around the spouse and the children. Right now, you offer a flat $10,000 for the spouse, $5,000 for the dependents, the children, and we're going to expand that to offer in 5,000 increments, voluntary life to the spouses, up to $250,000 of life insurance. The guaranteed issue limit is roughly 50. That's not stated here, but so now your program is market competitive in terms of giving a lot more flexibility for buying coverage on the spouse, as well as the children. Instead of a limitation of 5, now you can buy 10 or 5 on the children. They've also thrown in what we call an open enrollment, which means that for both employees, spouse, and children, it's a one-time opening up of the program to allow all family members, including the employee, to buy the voluntary life this time. You would only have to prove insurability for amounts over the guaranteed issue limits. And so in essence, we're opening it up this one time to allow them to purchase for their family and themselves life insurance as if they were a new employee. So if they choose to not do this, of course, we'll communicate this, then any increase later on would require insurability, evidence of insurability. On the short term, doesn't state it here, but with Lincoln National, that's your current vendor, we've lowered the short-term disability rates by 15%. We think that they're a good option to continue to cover or to provide that coverage for you. We would like to change their LTD offering to allow for employees to buy in increments of $100 up to $5,000 benefit. So in essence, and up to 60%. Right now, your program is a flat 40% of coverage maximum. So now your plan will be market competitive in terms of what they're offering. And the ultimate rates for the similar coverage or the same coverage today is actually less than what they're paying today. So all in all, big improvements on the life and disability programs. Supplemental voluntary benefits, you're currently offering voluntary critical illness, accident, and whole life through Unum. We've marketed those. We feel like you ought to offer a hospital indemnity program. Basically, it pays a flat benefit for each day you're in the hospital. Hartford would be the preferred service provider carrier for those critical illness and accident. By and large, it's better programs at a lower cost. The whole life plan that is currently being offered, giving the voluntary life that they can purchase through your normal voluntary life program, we would suggest you discontinue to actively offer that or payroll deduct it. What we think is, or what we know is an option, is that to be communicated that all these people that are currently participating are able to take that with them, port it at the same rates, and they would pay for it personally. It would just no longer continue to be payroll deducted. So the bottom line is they're not losing that coverage. We're just offering up a different set of voluntary benefits. We've evaluated your Legal Shield and iShield plans. We think those are very competitive. There's no reason to disrupt those. And we'll continue to, would suggest that you continue to offer those programs. So moving on to the next, Employee Assistant, EAP. Currently, your program is kind of an add-on. We'll say it's an additional feature thrown in as a part of your disability program today. We suggest moving to a full EAP program through Magellan, which is a company that's basically the standard offering by Blue Cross. And we'll talk more about the details of that in a second. We also think that a wellness program would be an attractive thing to offer. And given the $100,000 wellness allowance, those are dollars that can be made available in 21, but we would implement some of those programs that were in wellness in 20, and then you would be reimbursed for any of those expenses in 21 with $100,000. So both programs we see as a big plus for your employees going forward. And I apologize, the EAP, the actual cost of that is roughly $10,600. That was a misprint. That was an earlier cost. And so that's an error in that slide. So moving on to the next slide, I think we got a little more about the EAP with Magellan. So that offers 5 sessions per issue per year. So it's if you have varying different type problems that come up with you or your family, that is 5 sessions per issue per year. So, and there's various options. They can do have access through telemedicine. You can do face-to-face. And given COVID and what's going on these days, that kind of flexibility is a must. And so we feel like this is a very robust program. There's other things that are involved and program features that you can access. There's also training and seminars for your folks, wellness resources, work-life programs. So it's not smoking cessation. There's other things baked in there other than just mental health kinds of issues. So unless there's further questions, moving on from there. Next slide. So in summary, no increase in monthly premiums for employees and retirees for medical or the dental. No plan changes that we see are necessary at this time. We do think the move of the medical to Blue Cross and to Delta Dental reflects the overall best value choice for you guys. We're saying keep the budgets the same to help build the reserves. We are spending a few of those dollars, so it's not exactly the same, but we're spending a few dollars on life insurance and the EAP, and then we have allowance dollars to spend on the wellness program. And so, as I typically say to employers and for you guys, benefit consulting and what you do your program, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So there's certain things we'd like and suggest that we've talked about here for 21. We'll continue to keep our eye on the dollars and cents and make other recommendations for the future. But we think the best course of action is how we've outlined here. So basically the work just began, if you will. So moving from there, I want to bury you with a few numbers. So I'm not going to go over all these, but in your materials, you'll see the current medical dental. This is a complete kind of an annualized budget confirmation of where your dollars are being spent today. At the top, that's total budget dollars. The middle is the employee contribution amounts, and the net to the seat is at the bottom. So as you can see, with currently, there you're at $6,378,000. If you stay with Aetna, roughly the projection is $6,024,000 for the medical by itself, a total budget of $6,630,000. So all the other lines of coverage are actually unchanged. The exception of, I mentioned the STD, there was a break there of the 50%. That's what that represents. Employee contributions with Aetna is being increased versus keeping them packed if we go to Blue Cross. So we're dropping that budget just a hair below where you're at today on the medical, keeping the dental where it's at. You'll see the other lines of coverage. The rest of those are employee paid items, so they're reflected down here as well. And so over here is, again, the two far right column is we're adding the cost of the EAP, adding the 1 times basic annual earnings. And so net effect, it is neutral in terms of impacting your budget for 21. Recognizing that we have spent a few dollars here of your savings. So admittedly, we're investing a few dollars. So that was really it for my part of the presentation here. The next slide, there's just support slides. There's no reason to really look at those. So Cheryl, unless you had some other comments, or the council, mayor, any questions on your part?
Yeah, we're open to receive questions.
John and Cheryl, this is Jesus. I just want to publicly thank you, John, and your team, and Cheryl as well, for all the work that collectively you all have accomplished just in the, literally just in the 8 to 9 months that you have been working with us. It's safe to say that it's night and day in terms of the services that we're getting from you, and that was the whole intent, right? And in order for us to come ahead out of this marathon that you referenced, we really need to think strategically, make intentional decisions, small ones, to hopefully improve the value of our benefit package. And that's probably a word that we don't use enough, but it's a word that I've began using with staff that I hope we all continue to use, because oftentimes we get so caught up in just the medical part of our benefit package that we lose sight of the overall value. And what we're trying to do by adding the full service EP, by covering life insurance, is enhance the value of our offerings, so that at minimum, hopefully our employees can begin feeling a little better about the cost of our insurance because they're getting a better product and getting more options. And so at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. And I feel very confident that we're taking steps in the right direction to do that. You know, no small part thanks to, you know, Lockton, Cheryl and her team, and even Gator and his team for their involvement in the process as well.
Is there a mechanism by which you get feedback from the employees once we start into these new programs to see about the employee satisfaction, any recommendations that they have as these plans develop? Because at the end of the day, we do this all for the benefit.
Right. So I think there's a couple things going on. So early in my tenure last year, we conducted a survey with the leadership team where we asked specific questions about their level of satisfaction with our benefits. That's a survey we intend to continue to do at least every other year, and that might help gauge sort of where their feelings are with the benefits that we have to offer. It was actually through that survey that we realized that there was a strong desire from our employees for us to explore going back to a PPO, that employees wanted us to explore the health clinic concept. And so from that survey came ideas on what to look for. But it also presented an opportunity for us to educate the leadership team on just our situation and what needs to happen. So that's already happened. What is happening now is that we actually did put together a committee of employees that, not specific for this, but have been involved with our compensation study, which also looks at benefits. And so our intention is to build upon that committee so that we can have employee representation as we continue to make enhancements to not only our compensation program, which I'll talk a little bit about next, but also our overall benefit package. And so both through the formal survey, through the leadership team, and this committee that we established that we're beginning to slowly ramp up, that's how we want to keep a pulse within the employees to see if what we're doing is making a difference. And obviously at the end of the day, the numbers will prove whether we're making a difference or not in terms of retention and recruitment, because we do know that benefits is a big reason why we lose employees.
Jesus, if I can add just one other comment on that. With that survey, we also heard back that people want a more robust EAP program. And so that was a focus of ours going into this as well, is to look at more what functionality or offerings we could do with that. So I think with that proposal tonight, or that recommendation, we've met that request from our employees as well.
That's good. I would encourage you to keep that up and to listen to our employees and understand their needs are, so that we, to the best extent we can, meet those needs for them.
Yes, sir.
This isn't an action item. Obviously, this is a city manager's report, but if there are no major objections to what has been discussed, we're going to proceed with what's been recommended by our consultant.
I agree.
Thank you.
Will this
Great.
come back as an action item later? Or is it something that the committee's gonna decide and not come back?
You kind of broke out. What was your question?
I said, is this going to be an action item later?
I'm not sure actually. I've seen it both ways. I've worked for cities where stuff like this is council action, and in some cities where it's not. Thomas, I don't know, or Cheryl, if you have a clearer answer to that question.
I don't believe we've adopted a resolution in the past. Cheryl's memory may be better than mine. I think that we have simply taken direction from council during the budget process and then implemented those changes as part of the budget. Cheryl, is that your recollection?
I do remember bringing forward the Aetna contract whenever we moved forward with that network. And so we'll probably look to see that happen with Blue Cross Blue Shield as well. And so I would expect to see that come back around. Other than that,
Absolutely.
The direction of where we're headed, we've just gotten some feedback from council that we're on the right path. And so we just move forward from there.
That's a good point. The contract itself will be approved, but the rest of the details may not need a formal resolution.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
We appreciate your time. And
Thank you, John.
certainly available for questions as they come up later.
Mr. Sims, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Mr. Garza, is there anything else in your city manager report?
Not under city manager report, but if you don't mind, I can transition straight into the work session, which is
Yes,
related to the budget.
Please do.
So before I begin the presentation, I want to just quickly recap the conversation that we had last week. The direction that we received from council last week was to explore options to, in essence, free up some funds that could be applied towards a pay program to prioritize police and fire. We also communicated last week that we're literally in the middle of finalizing the compensation plan that we started earlier this year, and that we were fast tracking some of that data, specifically with police and fire, so that we can have an educated conversation about how we might want to proceed. And so we've prepared some of that information for you today, but we felt it was appropriate to take you a little bit back to just what we've done before. The next few slides are literally slides from the presentation that was given by staff back in 2013 when the STEP program for police and fire was first established. And so a lot of what you'll hear me talk about today is about a STEP program, both an existing STEP program and potential changes to a future STEP program. And a lot of the information or a lot of the rationale that was provided in 2013 is still very relevant today. A STEP program is a very common structure of a program for police and fire. It makes it very easy for our personnel to understand at what point they're coming in and provides a roadmap on where they might be able to go in the future. And obviously, following the progression of the steps is the way that that's accomplished. One of the things that's very important about any STEP program, and it was made very clear in 2013, is that it's all predicated off of available funding. I know that in the past, and I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but we've talked about some of the challenges that we have had on a recurring basis, having additional revenue to be able to achieve our goals and objectives. And that certainly has played an impact in our ability to adequately keep up with market, even though the STEP program was developed and created to do so. One of the things that is important to also mention is that at the time the STEP program was created to try and address the very same thing that we're still trying to address now, which is this thought that we're behind market. And the STEP program was, again, created with very specific goals and objectives on a timeline on when to catch up to that to the market. But the market's always moving. And so with the data that I'll show you today, you'll see that even though we've invested in the STEP program, in certain positions, that market has continued to just outpace what we've been able to do. One of the other things that is important to mention, and will be made clear in a couple of other slides, is the fact that the existing STEP program does not include the leadership positions within police and fire. It focuses on the frontline folks. And so this is just a quick slide, same slide that was showed in 2013 on the positions that the STEP program would include and does include till this day. Going back to 2013, this is a brief summary of the pay programs that the city has funded for police and fire. This does not include pay programs that the city has done for employees that are not within police and fire. In some of these years, there has also been some pay program for all the other employees as well. There's an asterisk next to 2014 because that was the very first year the STEP program was established. I don't have a slide or slides that show the STEP program specifically because I actually don't want to focus too much on the existing STEP program, but rather focus our conversation or my presentation on what the market data is telling us, and have conversations about some ideas on how we might be able to enhance a future STEP program as we work to put one together. But I do want to bring to your attention a couple of elements. One is the usage of the word average throughout this slide. That in itself tells you that the STEP programs had different increases within the steps. So the existing structure of a STEP program has increases that range from 1% all the way to 5%, which of course on average is 3%, and that's why it's verbalized that way. But obviously if you're that particular employee, you might get that 1%, you might get the 5%. And at the time it was designed that way so that as you progress through the steps and thus have more years in service, you get a higher percentage and almost embed a longevity pay component into the STEP program. But that's why you see the word average in there. I also mentioned that the STEP program officially does not include some of the leadership positions. And so you'll notice throughout our history, there have been across the board, that's what the ATB is, across the board increases for some of the leadership roles since they technically are not included in the STEP program. And obviously our police department also has key civilian employees, dispatchers as an example, civilian employees, but are obviously critical to what we do. And so you'll notice the usage of the word civilian in what we've done in the past, and that has accounted for the non-uniformed or fully certified folks within the police and fire. More recently, last year, we did not offer a pay program for any employee, but you may recall that we did a slight adjustment or a slight decrease to the employee portion of health insurance. So that wasn't a huge hit for each individual employee, but it was a several $100,000 cost for us. And obviously in fiscal year 21, you've heard us talk about us trying to make it right and fully fund the employer part of health premiums, which is an additional $1 million. And so our focus going into fiscal year 20 and going into fiscal year 21 was to address the health insurance aspect of it. But naturally, we also wanted to know where do we stand with compensation. Cheryl mentioned it earlier when she introduced John, that a big goal of that exercise is to be an employer of choice and offer a competitive package. Well, obviously that includes compensation as well. Some of the goals and objectives of us going through this program holistically was to, of course, analyze our position in the market and make necessary adjustments. One thing to note is that the compensation study that we embarked on earlier this year applies for all of the organization. So it wasn't specific just for police and fire. It was intended to capture all of the positions. One could literally take any position and come up with cities that might better match that. I'll use myself as an example. You know, when I presented the case on adding assistant city managers, you know, I used a very specific rationale on developing the cities that were used for that. This was different, and I'll get to that in a second. Another goal and objective was to review and update our classification system, the way that we just classify our positions. Even though the city had updated this for police and fire in 2013, the rest of the organization really hadn't gone through any significant change in classification system or structure of their positions since I think the late 80s or early 90s. And so there was a need for us to literally revamp it for everybody. Obviously, as I mentioned too earlier at the end of the medical benefit presentation. A big goal of ours is to improve our retention and recruitment. And I'll hit on a couple of those numbers here in the next several slides. I do want to talk a little bit about pay range and pay range placement, simply to frame that the conversation that we want to have with council and that is appropriate to have with council is centered around these parameters. The bulk of our conversation today and moving forward as the company finishes the compensation program will be focused on these pay ranges, which in essence are parameters. Are we within the right playing field of where we need to be? Ultimately, it's an administrative task, which would be mine and Cheryl's, to determine where within those parameters does it make sense for our individual employees to partake. And so at no point are we going to have a conversation with you about very, very specific individuals, but rather about the positions themselves and about the context of this pay range system, and trying to kind of see, okay, are we within the appropriate boundaries of it? And that's obviously step one, right? If we don't get the parameters right, the placement within those guiding numbers is going to be completely way off. And I'll talk through some examples here shortly. I mentioned that we used a completely different formula to develop the cities that we included in the study. We actually worked with our financial advisor to look at cities that have similar tax bases. And so we literally developed the list, and I'm happy to send that separately to you if you're interested, on cities that have similar general fund revenues per capita, similar sales tax revenues per capita, because we really wanted to tackle the reality that it's not just about population, but also about money. And we also wanted to include a little bit of where are we losing people to? Obviously, we do lose people to large metro areas, your San Antonios, your Houstons, but it would have been impractical for us to include those because they would have skewed the numbers significantly. And so we wanted to be realistic with the players that we're working with. You obviously see that we included some non-cities in there, mainly local entities, because again, our compensation study was for the entire city. So some of these employers like Victoria College, they have administrative assistants, they have accountants, they have communications professionals, they have building and maintenance folks. Some of them obviously have transportation folks. I mean, there's just so many different elements to it. And so that's why you see them in there. Obviously, when we're looking at police and fire, they're not taken into account in those, but that's the reason why they're in there. Just really quickly, as I mentioned earlier, we're wrapping up that entire process. And so some of the things that have taken place revolve around finalizing the comparisons to our city counterparts, as well as this classification system. I mentioned that the classification part of it is a big part of this study. And so it might yield, for example, getting rid of certain positions that we have, consolidating with others to make it more of a modern approach to the way that we do that. And we're currently in the middle of playing around with different modeling and pay range tables, specifically with police and fire, so that we can begin having that conversation with you and obviously our employees. Holistically, we envision the entire process being completed in the next 2 or 3 months. And so there's still a lot of work ahead of us, but we have prioritized looking at some raw data for police and fire for today's conversation. I'm gonna go into specifics in the next several slides, but big picture, what the data shows is that for the values for ranks above sort of some of those entry level positions, that we're actually okay. You'll see in the next slides that where we struggle is with our police officer and firefighter positions, but not so much our command level folks like sergeants, lieutenants, and some of those positions. I'm gonna spend a few minutes on this slide because I do want to use this as a point of reference before I go through a few others. And so you could very clearly see on this slide what I just verbalized, which was that once you start getting into police sergeant, police lieutenant, that we're actually pretty close to market. And you see that for police and mainly senior police officer, we're very, very much behind market. That's close to 20% behind market of starting pay for a senior police officer. And one of the things to note too is that as we go through the police slides, we should look at police and police officer and senior police officer almost as one and the same. because the way that our structure has the career progression of a police officer, starting as a police officer and then at year 3 or 4, testing to become a senior police officer. And so if you can visualize what that progression looks like, they start off as police officers. In 3 or 4 years, they upgrade, if you will, or get promoted to senior police officer, which is the position that we're furthest behind market. And I actually went back and asked staff to pull figures on, are the employees that we're losing senior police officers. And over the last 3 years, we have lost 14 senior police officers. This is not counting people that have retired. These are people who are legitimately just leaving to go work somewhere else. And so that tells us that there is a positive correlation between the fact that we're behind market at the senior police officer level, and those are the people that we're losing at a greater degree. Now, obviously people leave for a variety of reasons. I'm not saying that they're leaving solely because of the pay. They leave because of benefits. They leave because they want to be closer to home. We have documented that about 12% of our police personnel live outside Victoria County. And so some of them might choose to just go home. Nevertheless, it obviously sticks out. I talked earlier about the importance of looking at this from a range standpoint. And so clearly, if we're not even starting our senior police officers where they need to in accordance to the market, then clearly everything that backfills after that, we're behind on, right? So if somebody is 5, 6, 7, 8 years into the profession, they could literally leave here and make $15,000 to $20,000 making more in another place. And I could tell you that as we have this conversation, we actually have about half a dozen senior police officers that are in the process of transitioning out for that exact same reason, that they come, they get their experience here. Once they hit 5 years, they can make $15,000, $20,000 somewhere else. And those are the unfortunate facts of that. On the police, for the top out, this would be the end of the range. You'll see that for senior police officer, we're actually fairly competitive on the top of the range. Our issue is where we begin, not so much where we end, and that's where we lose folks. You'll notice that for police officers, we're also behind market, but I'll add a caveat to that, that's because our current structure promotes police officers at 3 or 4 years to become a senior police officer. So our existing pay range for a police officer cuts off, versus in other communities, which the data supports, folks can actually stay as a police officer for longer than 3 years and continue to progress as a police officer without promoting to a senior police officer or without promoting to a corporal. But that's why that significant variance there. Again, on the police sergeant front, we're not too far off, but we are a little bit off. I'm more concerned with where we are with senior police officer. We transition to fire. This list is a little different, so I'll ask that you look at the bottom of the slide where we have the firefighters. And so you'll see a very consistent theme, which as you promote up, we've actually done a fairly good job of staying close to market, but where we're lagging the most is at the firefighter level, medic and engineer. And once you promote up to lieutenant or captain, we're actually right on point. And really quickly on the firefighter turnover, over the last 3 years, we have lost 27 firefighters for a variety of different reasons as well. We do have 44% of firefighters that live outside Victoria County, and an estimated 22% that live outside the region. And so more so than with police, a lot of our fire personnel truly leave to be closer to home, just because a lot of them do have pretty long commutes. So again, over the last 3 years, we've lost 27 firefighters, 17 medics. And again, there's a positive correlation with those being the positions that we're behind in market, and those are the ones that we're losing. On the top of the range, you'll notice that there are some improvements for both police and fire. at the top of the range that we can adjust to. But obviously, if we're starting behind, we're going to end behind for fire engineer, medic, and firefighter as well. And I'm probably not telling you anything that you probably don't already know. But seeing the data, I think, helps us realize that if we are to solve these challenges, they're not going to be solved by across the board increases, because giving everybody a 1%, 2%, or 3% is not going to fix, the positions where we're literally 20%, 8%, 10% behind. And so the way that we have to approach it is different. And it would be different and make some people happy and some might not. But early on when we embarked this process, our goal was to try and correct where we're behind. And clearly the market is telling us where we're behind. Some of the other things that came out of this compensation study, I alluded to it earlier. They're also looking at benefits. I'm not sure how familiar you are with our retirement program, but it is a 2-to-1 offering at 12%. However, most of our competitors offer that at 14%. So that retirement benefit is a little better than ours. And the second bullet goes to one of the points that was made by John, that we're sort of reasonably within our competitors in terms of the monthly allowance that the employer puts in for health insurance. This doesn't capture all of the data, but I wanted to include it simply to show that prior to us correcting this premium issue, meaning we weren't adequately funding the premiums, and you would have compared us, you would have seen that we provide an average of $460 versus others providing $1,100. And so by us correcting that issue, now we're more visibly competitive with folks. And so I'm not sure if anybody would ever actually go into the weeds with that when they're comparing leaving us to go somewhere else. But at its surface, the fact that we corrected that issue clearly puts us at a better standing within market. One of the things that comes up as well with police and fire, of course, is certification pay. And in those areas, we're doing good. There's, of course, some cities that have collective bargaining agreements where they get things like education pay and a couple of other things that we don't offer. But the majority of the certifications that we do offer are monetarily speaking, are competitive with other markets. So where that leaves us is, quite frankly, we have a lot of work to do. Clearly, we need to update the STEP program to better align with market. What we've realized in our effort to put something together to show you is that there are other opportunities for improving the STEP program other than simply monetary. And so for those potential enhancements, we need to engage both the police chief and the fire chief, because what we want to do is establish a new STEP program that is nimble enough to keep up with the market in the future, but also, quite frankly, reflective of the modernization of the operations of both police and fire. And so we want to give both chiefs an opportunity to play a role in that. And obviously, we're in the middle of finding a police chief that obviously we would want their input at some point in the process as well. A couple of highlights that we would look to incorporate into a new STEP program is obviously placing police and fire personnel in the according within the range and within the STEP. We want to make sure that we're sensitive to our monetary limitations. And so it isn't something that would happen in a year more than likely, but we want to at least place folks on a path that they can clearly see that we're headed towards being within market. And so those are some of the challenges that we had ahead of us. And quite frankly, there just wasn't enough time to figure that out prior to today. Fortunately, though, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we are establishing a hazard pay program that would run through the end of the calendar year. And so if we simply take that as a guiding timeline, we would be looking for the implementation of the STEP program to take place in January. So it gives us a little bit of time to get it right. And that's what, in essence, what we're recommending is to give us a month or so to work with the chiefs and develop a STEP program that can more aggressively catch us up and be more intentional with that. And to be determined on what that looks like, again, clearly doing across the boards isn't the answer to addressing where we're lagging behind. And so that's a hard conversation that we'll need to have with the chiefs. Now, of course, you're probably wondering, well, how much money are we going to have to work with and what does that look like? And so based on the direction that we received from council, we've made some adjustments. You may recall that we had briefly suggested consideration of an increased tax rate that would generate close to $330,000. And so we set out to allocate and reserve $350,000 for a program. Literally 2 days after we had that last council meeting, we received updated sales tax revenues, and I have a slide coming up to show that, which allows us or helps us feel more confident about increasing our sales tax revenue projection for fiscal year 21 by the tune of $150,000. We also have made minor adjustments to some of our other revenue line items to help us close the gap. And the other big chunk is that we had taken a aggressive, proactive position on permanently funding the 4 police officers that we've received through the COPS grant. You may recall that this COPS grant funds police officers at 25% for the first few years before it literally jumps up to 100%. And so we were taking a very methodical approach to that and actually wanting to fund a lot of that over the next 2 years as opposed to waiting for year 4. And so we've decreased that amount so that we can still appropriately fund these 4 officers in fiscal year 21, but we've taken $140,000 from that reserve, if we want to call it that. And collectively, that totals the $350,000 that we would, in essence, amend the budget that was presented to you and would be updated for our budget workshop, our public hearing later this month to account for this additional $350,000 in revenue. On the sales tax front, as I mentioned, we recently received our receipts from July, and so they came in about $133,000 higher than expected. And so this is what gave us the, I guess, freedom or the confidence to increase that adjustment. It's a slight improvement once we look at that compared to fiscal year 19, which of course was the year before COVID. And so the original budget presented had us compared to 2019, a little about 10.5% behind 2019 figures. And by us making that $150,000 improvement would improve that to 9.5%. One of the benefits of waiting a month or 2 before formalizing a new STEP program is that it'll give us a couple more months of data for sales tax. And so we might actually be able to increase this projection even further later this fall. This is just another way of showing you what I already talked about in terms of the line items that we're increasing revenue on to help close the gap. And I can go back to that. I noticed a couple of you were looking at that. I don't have a next step slide, but in essence, the next steps I alluded to earlier, which would be us working with the chiefs to finalize a new structure for a STEP program that really helps us address our senior police officer position, as well as the medics, engineers, and firefighters, since those are the folks that we're losing the most and the folks that were the furthest behind in the market. And so we plan on doing that. And if council is okay with our approach, we'll amend the budget that gets presented as part of the public hearing later this month to increase it by $350,000 as presented. And then we'll just come back to you in a month or so with more specifics on what that pay program might look like. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I appreciate you going through that thorough analysis, and I appreciate you digging through to try and find that money for them.
I echo those sentiments, and I do have a question that always comes up. I hear people from time to time speak about the investment we make in training these people as they come into our fire and police department, and then we lose them And I hear, various numbers thrown out there, 100,000, this and that. Is there a number that you can actually come up with that's based upon on real numbers to know we invest in the training of folks to just lose them to these other cities?
Yeah,
And I'm not a guesstimate or something. I'm talking about a hard number.
I understand. Yeah. I mean, we can look at that. It's obviously we would have to make some assumptions in order to come up with a number. But that is an accurate statement though. You heard me talk earlier. Let me see. You heard me talk earlier, for instance, with senior police officer. Well, I guess it's hard to tell by these slides, but we currently, our police officers go through training and go through real life experience, for 3 years, and then they promote to senior police officer. And I'm not going to be able to get to it, but in essence, it depends on the number of years that folks are with us before they leave. And so when folks say that we invest a tremendous amount of money on folks, that's because it's the senior police officers that we're leaving. And so these are people that have been with us from 5 years to 12 years. I'm thinking back to the data that Cheryl provided me, and I think it included an average of, 7 or 8 years. So on average, when we lose these folks, it's around the 7 or 8 year mark. And if she's on, she can confirm that. But long story short, we can get the number, but it's going to be based on years of service that they have put in.
Kind of the misconception that it was, we train them and right as they get into the job and we lose them. So I've already been, it's been demonstrated that my perception wasn't exactly correct. And the fact that they stay here even that long and then we lose them is even a great loss to me, because you lose institutional memory, you lose camaraderie, you lose so much, when you want to hope that we would want programs where people for the city feel like we're investing in them. And that's the way I tend to look at it. When we pay people, we train people, we give them good benefits, it's an investment we make on with these folks, and their part of the bargain is to stay with us, do good work.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way
Well, and that's, yeah. Well, and trust me, that's the way they feel. That they feel that, they've been here for 6, 7, 8 years, and we're so behind market that, they can get hired on somewhere else making $15,000, $20,000 more a year. And trust me, we get that feedback from other police departments. I mean, literally, I've even had other city managers tell me, hey, you guys develop great cops. We took 2 of your guys. And it's kind of like, why can't we be the department that's snatching people away, right, and bringing people here? But it's going to take doing a pay program that's different than what we've done in the past, because our challenge is a little bit different.
I appreciate all the hard work in coming up with this step forward, and that's what I look at it as a step forward process that'll begin hopefully with them and then migrate on into all of our employees.
Absolutely. And just a quick clarifying point. So that 7 to 8 year mark that I mentioned is when we lose senior police officers, but we actually do lose police officers before they ever get senior police officers. And so we lose those folks at around the 2 to 3 year mark. And so while that number isn't as high as senior police officers, what you described does happen as well.
Right.
And what you saw today, quite frankly, is a snapshot of what you see throughout the entire organization. We have some positions that we pay fine. We have some positions where we're even ahead of the market, but we have some positions where we're just very behind, and we're not going to solve those differences by simply focusing our attention on across the board increases. And so that will be a challenge for us on how we develop a strategic pay program over the next several years that can hopefully help close these gaps.
I think this is a good start. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to discuss the excess fund balance? And let me just throw something out there. Brought up by Josie last meeting that any pay raise would be a reoccurring expense. And I realize that the excess fund balance is sort of extra money that usually would be used for one-time things. Is there any way, and I'll give you an example, I talked to Tom today about the OPED trust. We pay $200,000 a year, and I think we have 15 more years to pay that. If we took some of the excess fund balance and put it into the trust, we would then have that money that is recurring, and we could use that for pay raises, if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible, but my whole point is, what things could we use this fund balance to do away with, so we have some reoccurring money so we can have pay raises without raising taxes?
So a few clarifying points, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So that OPEB, we are scheduled to continue paying for the OPEB till 2024. It's not another 15 years that we're committed to paying for the OPEB. And currently we're paying for it from actually money from the TxDOT Overpass Fund. Several years ago, that was how that program was scheduled to be paid for. And so, some of you may recall that. And so I wanted to kind of clarify that comment that you made.
But aren't we paying $200,000 every year for the last so many years?
Correct. It's a commitment that occurs annually. And currently it's scheduled to end in 2024, at which point, obviously before then, we would reevaluate the position of the OPEB and determine whether something else is needed outside of that. At this point, we don't have a cause for trying to address the OPEB. But to your point about the excess fund balance, I might have mentioned to you, and if not, I apologize, but we are in the process of developing a draft of a policy that would establish a process for excess fund balance to be placed into some type of fund. We do plan on bringing that council in September for discussion. I believe you had recommended that we focus on capital improvements, but I can tell you that it would more than likely be a recommendation that we focus on just having almost like a rainy day fund that we can utilize for a variety of different needs as they come up. But that conversation we're working on the background. Hope to bring something for council discussion in September.
That would be great.
I just want to see us to be smart and creative in coming up with solutions to these national problems. And by that, I don't mean smoke and mirrors. I mean true, legitimate ways of taking care of these issues that we haven't, explored before. So I think on the right track in studying these things in great detail, and I appreciate it. Have any more for the city manager on this work session?
No, sir, that's all that we have for tonight. As a reminder, we'll have a special council meeting on August 27th. That would be the public hearings associated with the budget and the tax rate. And those meetings we will conduct in person, and more than likely it would be a hybrid option. And so we obviously don't want to force you to come to council chambers if you don't want to, but we will start transitioning back to in-person council meetings, beginning with the special council meeting later this month being a hybrid setup. So you are welcome to come to council chambers for that meeting.
Okay, and I think we have 2 executive sessions tonight, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then there won't be any anticipated action taken out of either one of those. And so for all practical purposes, this meeting is
Recess.
We'll step on into executive session. If you will determine the times with the secretary, and then we'll move on into executive session.
Yes, sir. City Council is going to recess now into executive session at 7:05 p.m. There are two topics for discussion in executive session. The first is under section 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property interest due to the fact that a deliberate would have a detrimental effect on our position in negotiations with a third party. And the second is under under section 551.087 to discuss or deliberate the offer of a financial or other offer incentive to a business prospect that the city council seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the city of Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we stay on, and Mr. Foote will do his magic.